StrayAllDay.com. Baldwin, StrayAllDay.com. I hadn't talked about this, but I've been talking about it a lot on social media, specifically on X. That's the only app where I really engage people in commentary. But I will make a video about it now, about this ongoing conversation regarding Caitlin Clark and the WNBA, women's basketball in general, and the marketing / attention that many advocates, let's just say, of women's basketball believe that women's basketball, quote unquote, deserves. So first things first is that in life you don't deserve anything just because you believe you should have it. All right, that's not how life works. You don't just deserve something. You don't deserve something until you actually have it. And unless you're willing to go out there and get it, then continually complaining and whining about what you feel like you deserve or someone you support you feel like they deserve does absolutely nothing, and it means nothing. It has no real significance. So what I've heard a lot of women's basketball advocates saying, well, they deserve more marketing, they deserve more attention. And then this year, because Caitlin Clark, obviously a very popular player, she got a lot of casuals, women's basketball casuals, to pay attention to women's basketball. It got a lot more attention for the Final Four, the championship game, and then the WNBA draft subsequently after that. And people are like, well, see, if you just put more attention on it, then it produces more results. And that's incorrect. That's false. What actually happened is there was a player who, because of her performance and her ability, she drew more attention of more people, and that's why more people were watching. It's not because all of a sudden the marketers, the people behind the marketing of women's basketball, all of a sudden said, let's put attention on it and let's see what happens. That's not what happened. The attention was drawn by a player, and because the attention was drawn, then the results happened. It wasn't we gave a bunch of attention and then all of a sudden these things happen. Had they did that last year, the year before, it wouldn't have got the same attention, because people still have to watch. You put whatever you want on TV, doesn't mean everybody's going to watch it. Just like you can put a video on YouTube. You can put as much marketing behind it as you want, but if it's not producing a return on investment, which has to be measured, then nothing else is going to move forward. That's just the way business works in general. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg conversation. And the reason why this conversation goes on the way that it does is simply because we're talking about women's basketball, and you have a lot of, again, advocates of women's basketball who are using the women shield and also the black women's shield they're using it as a leverage point of this whole conversation. Oh, see, they're just not promoting black women. They didn't start promoting it, and then people will go to, well, they didn't start promoting it until the white girl came along. They weren't promoting it when black girls have been doing it. And, I heard, what's the woman who's the WNBA MVP, Asia Wilson, saying, well, the WNBA was built on the backs of black women. Like, people need to stop saying that shit. That nothing was built on your back if you didn't put the money up. All right, the way things get built in business is you put the money up. If you didn't put the money up and take the financial risk to start in endeavor, business-wise, nothing was built on your back. Now, just because you work there, all right, okay, you worked there, you did good, you put up stats, you produced, but it's a job. All right, you had a job to do X, Y, Z, you did X, Y, Z, you got paid what the contract said. Okay, that's a fair deal. Nothing was built on your back. When people say that, they're implying as if they're owed something extra in addition to what they agreed to work for. You sign a contract and they say, we're going to give you $1 million a year, and they give you your $1 million, and you have a 5-year contract, and now you got $1 million 5 years straight. They don't owe you anything. All right, they didn't build it on your back. Built it on your back would be like, if someone wants to talk about slavery, then you have a claim because you weren't getting paid, you were forced into labor. You at least have a claim in that sense. Now, nobody alive today was a slave, but again, I'm just saying that at least you have some point to stand on. But if you got paid a job, paid a salary at a job, nothing was built on your back. And it's the same thing with NBA players. I remember a couple years ago, Kyrie Irving, who I like, he said, what did he say? Black kings built the NBA. And that's when he was pushing this ridiculous idea that they need to change the NBA logo to a silhouette of Kobe Bryant, which is a ridiculous idea. And his argument point was, well, black people built the NBA. No, black people did not build the NBA. Black people have been dominant in the NBA, but the builders of the NBA are the people who put the money up. Again, this is how business works. If you didn't put the money up, then you didn't build anything. So every NBA, WNBA player, y'all didn't build anything. Y'all are workers, y'all are employees. You You are paid employees or contractors or however they do it. But you didn't build anything because you didn't put no money up. Right? Did you put any of your cash on the line to start the league? No? All right, shut the hell up. You didn't build anything. Now back to the point that I was talking about here. I saw this post on X, formerly known as Twitter, this morning, and it was saying that Dick's Sporting Goods is going to have Caitlin Clark memorabilia, t-shirts, etc., jerseys, all that, in every store in the nation. And she's the first WNBA player for whom they've done that. They put her stuff in every store that they have. And someone was saying, well, see, this is what I mean when I say marketing is a choice. And there's a whole bunch of female women's basketball advocates, mostly black females who I'm seeing doing this. I'm not saying they're the only ones, but they're the ones that I keep seeing on my feed on social media, probably because I've responded to a bunch of them talking about this, because many of them don't understand business, or even if they do understand business, their emotions are clouding their judgment. So they're talking about it from an emotional standpoint, and they're saying, well, if you would just put more marketing dollars behind some of these black female players, then they would get the attention too. And the answer is no, that's not true. And let me tell you why. A big company like Dick's Sporting Goods or ESPN or even the NCAA itself, or their broadcasting partners, their media partners, the reason why they haven't put a lot of marketing push behind the WNBA is because people have simply not been interested. People have not been interested in the WNBA. It has existed for over a quarter of a century. Everyone knows that it's there. People have just not cared. When Caitlin Clark came along, people started to care. It got more attention because they had a superstar player. Now it's been buoyed by her presence, and hopefully now that she's gone from women's college basketball that is, hopefully they can keep the attention up. We'll see. I think it'll go down a little bit because there's no other player who's captivated the country's attention like her. Yeah, I'm not saying there aren't other players who are good, but that's not the question, because they had good players for 25 years. The question is, do any of these players draw the attention of the casual basketball fan? It's not a question of can they play. And sometimes people put that argument up there, oh, these women are so good and they do this and that. Nobody cares. There are a lot of people who are good at what they do. They don't get an audience. There are scientists who are good at what they do. Do they get marketed on TV? Or just because you're good at what you do doesn't mean you deserve anything. Again, as I've already stated. And the other thing that people are saying is, well, they just, again, we got the whole put the money behind the athletes thing. And then when it comes to individual athletes, now you get the black people pulling a race card. Oh, well, you just got to put more money behind this girl or that girl. So Mrs. Wilson, she plays the center position. I went to a game in Vegas and I actually enjoyed it. And they were saying, well, she deserves a sneaker deal because Caitlin Clark got a sneaker deal. Well, how many centers get sneaker deals? And sneakers usually don't sell. We know that from the men's side of things, let alone the women's side of things. And a lot of women's shoes aren't really that popular. I mean, how many people walk around talking about women's basketball sneakers? I saw an article on ESPN. There was one women's basketball shoe, I believe it was Ionesco. Her shoe, a lot of men players were playing in it, and people were trying to put that up there, like, oh, well, see, this is why you got to get women basketball shoes. So it's always like this chicken and egg issue. Like, something works, and they're like, oh, well, see, you just got to do it for everybody, and then it'll work out. All right. What if men walking around saying that? Oh, you know what? If they would just if people would just pay as much attention to, my YouTube channel as they do fucking Mr. Beast, then I would have a billion subscribers on YouTube too. Yeah, it sounds good, but something that the person who already has that thing, they did something to draw that attention. And that part we can't just leave out and say, oh, well, we just got to give it to them just because. And the only reason that this argument gets any traction is because, again, you have the female card. So when a man, such as myself, says things like this, it looks like you're, like, for lack of a better term, bullying the female by not agreeing with what they're saying. So a lot of men who agree with what I'm saying here, they agree with my sentiments, they won't say this stuff out loud because they don't want to get attacked by women and by feminized men who are too pussy to say this stuff out loud, and they'll attack you for saying something going against, quote unquote, going against women. And that's not the point. What we're talking about is what is actually true. And then you have also the black thing. So then if you're white, you can't say anything. And if you're black, you're supposed to not say anything just because of identity issues. And again, neither of these have anything to do with business. The fact that you're female or Asian or black or gay or whatever has nothing to do with a business decision. Now, that may drive whether people are interested in you or not, and that's part of business. But the business decision itself is not, oh, we're going to do this because they're women, we're going to do it because they're men, we're going to do it because they're black, we're going to do it because they're white. Big businesses become big businesses, and they become successful, and they last for years, like a Dick's Sporting Goods, for example, or a Nike, for example. The reason they last for years is because they make smart marketing decisions. That's why they're around the way that they're around. They make smart marketing decisions up front as to what should we invest our marketing resources in. And those are data and math driven decisions. They do research. They have focus groups. They find out what will sell, what will not sell. And that doesn't mean that they bat 1,000. It doesn't mean that every decision that they do works. But they make smart, educated, what's the word I'm looking for? Data driven decisions as to what to get involved in and what not to get involved in. And again, we know this is true because they wouldn't be the successful company that they are, and they would not have been around as long as they've been around if they didn't do things that way. If they just did things off of, oh, well, we should just give it to somebody just because, well, actually they do that. They call that charity. And speaking of charity, that's the reason why the WNBA exists. The WNBA has been around for a quarter of a century and has not turned a profit. So, and the NBA is what props up the WNBA. Those of you who don't know, NBA gives money to the WNBA every year to keep it alive, because on its own the WNBA would be insolvent and there wouldn't be enough money to pay the players. And regardless, I mean, even with this as a truth, I don't know if all of you noticed, a couple years ago, the WNBA increased the salaries of all the players in the league. They increased the salaries, and they increased the maximum salaries of players in the WNBA. Because when Caitlin Clark got drafted, somebody posted her salaries would be like $76,000 a year. $76,000 for 4 months of work at a job where a long day is 4 hours. You would have to triple that to equate to 12 months a year. So that takes you to, instead of $76,000, you have to triple that. So now let's just call that $210,000. And then you got to double it because a normal person works 8 hours a day. Basketball player works 4 hours a day. So now it's actually a $400,000 salary if we normalize it to what an everyday person does. And by the way, I'm a former professional athlete, so I know what the hell I'm talking about when I say it's 4 hours a day. Now, yes, your athletes train and they do all this off-season stuff and all these additional things they got to do to invest in themselves. Yes, we do that, but you don't get paid for that. That's the trade-off of the game, is that you have to do all that extra stuff so you can stay at that level, so you can compete with all the other people who are at that level. But the work itself is about 4 hours a day at the most. That's a long day, is 4 hours. Many days it ain't even that long. So it's really $410,000 that you're making a year to play a game for a living. And I remember back in the day, back in like the 90s, there used to be, people would always talk about, man, athletes are overpaid. Why are they getting all this money? All they're doing is playing the sport. Nowadays, you got people arguing athletes are underpaid, but we got to give this guy more money. He's not making enough. It's interesting how that's flipped, how societally that conversation has flipped so much. So now you got everyday people. Average American makes about somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. Average American household brings in about $64,000 a year. And now they're arguing that athletes who make way more than them, especially when you normalize it for how much time they're actually spending at work and how long their work season is, they're arguing that the athletes should get more money. This is a very interesting thing, which is a different conversation we'll have on a different day. The whole point here is women's basketball has to stand on its own power at some point, if you're going to have a legitimate business discussion. Whether you want to call this good news or bad news, we'll just call it news, is that will never actually be necessary, because the NBA would never pull away the funding that they're giving to the WNBA, because it would be PR suicide for them. If they just came out and said, look, we've been giving the WNBA money for years, we want to keep our own money, we're not responsible for the WNBA, and if they can't make any money, we're just going to let them collapse and die, then it would make them look terrible. People will just attack the NBA and say, why aren't you're not supporting women the way you're supposed to support women. And y'all know all the things that people say about supporting women, about supporting black people, etc. And because the NBA understands that, they will never, ever, ever stop funding the WNBA. So even if the WNBA continues to not make a profit, the NBA will continue to put money behind it. They will continue to fund it. And we will continue to see these conversations go on about the women need to make more money. And they'll probably keep increasing the women's salaries. It won't be long. Well, it might be kind of long. But I predict sometime in the future that WNBA players, even if their league fails to turn a profit based on just simple business mathematics and economics, eventually the women players will be getting $1 million salaries. Eventually that will happen. They'll get $1 million salaries. And one other thing I'll talk about here, that people talking about, Ice Cube even said this stupidly, and his comment when he was offering Caitlin Clark that $5 million contract, which I guess she turned down. He was saying, well, women players still have to go overseas to supplement their income so they can make enough money to take care of themselves. Like, no, they don't. Average American household brings in about $63,000, $64,000 a year. WNBA players making $75,000 that's like the lowest salary, $75,000. Well, Caitlin Clark, so let's say, for 4 months of work. So if she really wanted to do other work, she'd go make another $60,000 on her own, or another $40,000 on her own. That's more than the average household. She's getting it for 1/3 of the time period of working. So no basketball player has to, quote unquote, go overseas to supplement their income. They choose to because they want to make more money. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to make more money, but don't say that you have to when they don't have to. They're not broke. They're not destitute. Again, look at how the average household in America lives, and ask yourself, do you think that a WNBA player should live better than the average American household? Why? What are they providing? What service are they providing to you that makes you believe that they deserve, quote unquote, to have more money? Just because? What? Just because they're a basketball player? Why? Because they're a woman? Because they're black? What is it? Logically, there's no answer to that question. Logically, there's no answer. And a lot of people don't understand, again, how business works. A lot of people don't understand how sports works. In the sports world, women basketball players can make significant salaries overseas in their WNBA off-season. WNBA plays in the summertime because the players play overseas, and the WNBA can't compete financially with the overseas teams, which is why they don't have the same season schedule. What's going to happen, I'm pretty sure this is going to happen, I'll make this prediction, is that when the NBA negotiates this new broadcasting rights deal, which is where a lot of the money comes from that allows players to make the salaries that they make now, and the salaries keep going up as long as they keep those broadcasting rights, because people just like entertainment, is they're going to mix the WNBA in with the NBA in the deal, which will basically provide more money to the WNBA that the WNBA has not actually earned. And now the WNBA will have more money that really was provided by the NBA, again, continually. And then they'll be able to use that money to do more marketing, more and bigger salaries for the players, etc. So basically they're going to manufacture this thing to make it appear that the WNBA is actually a viable business product, when we already know 25 plus years in that it is not. And if the WNBA was standing on its own 2 feet without the support of the NBA, the league would have already folded because they would have already ran out of money. But because nobody says that part out loud, nobody wants to talk about it, WNBA will continue to exist. Eventually the players are going to get bigger and bigger salaries than what they're getting right now. And people will continue this farce of, well, people just need to support women's basketball. That's the only reason why it's not popping off or taking off the way that it's supposed to, and that's absolutely not the case. People are just not that interested. And it doesn't mean that the WNBA should not exist. It can exist. What they could do is let it stand on its own too, with the money that it actually has and money that it actually makes, and pay the players based on what they actually have. And WNBA players will be getting paid kind of like, what kind of money we're talking. So you say Caitlin Clark's contract was $76,000 for her first year. She might get $40,000 for her first year. That might be all they can afford. And again, with all the teams, all the players, that might be all they can afford. $40,000, $30,000 for 3 months of work is 4 months of work. That's actually a good business deal. How many of you would be happy if you got a contract to do some business with somebody and you had to work for 4 months and you got $40,000? That's $10,000 a month. How many of you would be happy with that? I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, and many of them all talk about making $10,000 a month. It's kind of like a gold standard for how much money people want to make. And this is what, if the WNBA was paying that to players, that would be a good business deal. But people are comparing them to NBA players. That's one thing. They're looking at the food on the NBA team's plate and like, hey, they should be getting paid something similar. How's the man player getting this much money, but the women players getting this much money? And another thing, I thought this was the last point, wasn't it? NBA players and supporters of the NBA, many of them, and especially the players, because all of them see what's going on. And these guys are people who have made it known that they are ones who will talk about social issues, right? Things going on in the world. Notice that all of them are too pussy to say anything that I'm saying right now out loud, even though they all know it. They all know it, but none of them will say it out loud. Why can't LeBron James come out and say, well, the reason the WNBA doesn't make the money that we make is because people are not as interested in their product as they are in ours? And without adding, well, they should support women's basketball. You don't have to support. Just because somebody has a business doesn't mean you need to support it. If your business can only run because you are guilting people into quote unquote supporting it, that means you don't have a business. If your business is legitimate, that means you should be making money based on the legitimacy of your products and services to the market that you're marketing to, and you're making money off that. Now, if someone wants to support, fine, but that can't be your entire business model. Oh, y'all just got to support us. You got to support women's basketball. You got to go buy tickets. You got to go buy jerseys. You got to go watch the games. How are you guilting people into supporting you in a business? That's what you do in charity. So you tell, if you work for the March of Dimes or the Red Cross or something like that, no breast cancer awareness, now you can guilt people into supporting that by giving to them charitably. All right, there are tax write-offs for charitable donations. And the WNBA, that ain't a charity. You ain't no charity. You're a business. If you're a business, then treat yourself like a business and act like a business and make some actual money. If you're not making money, that is not the guilt, is not the responsibility of the public to come and support a business that's been around for a quarter of a century and is still not really working the way that you want it to be working. That doesn't make any sense. So, all right, that's all I want to say, at least to this point, when it comes to WNBA stuff. Y'all tell me what you think, rather. If I got anything wrong here, logically, if I got anything wrong, yes, logically. All right, so I'm sure there's going to be some people jumping here with emotional arguments because most people are more driven by emotion than they are by logic. But if I got anything wrong logically, tell me what it is. But I know I didn't. But say what you got to say anyway. That's that. Work on your game. Dre all day.